I was thumbing through a woodworking magazine and saw this end table, and I wanted to give it a shot. I wanted to see if this is something I can build. I knew it'd be a little bit out of my skill set, but I wanted to challenge myself. At the same time, I did want to go out there and drop a whole bunch of money on a slab so that I could end up just butchering it. So I had this slab that a friend of mine gave me a while back. She actually gave me like 3 of these, and they're pretty weather beaten. They have a bunch of termite scars in them and, stains from the weather. But I thought if I could clean it up enough, maybe I could get enough wood out of this so that I can make this piece. And, it cleaned up okay. There's still a lot of damage on there, but I was going to highlight this damage and make it something beautiful. Take the scars and the weather stain and termite ruts and highlight them, because oftentimes it's those things that make the piece unique. One of the things I learned in my journey so far is that you want to keep the pieces as big as you can, as long as you can. So by the time you're done whittling and cutting and shaping and framing, you'll still have enough wood there to make your piece. And that's always been real helpful. I kept that in mind, and it really helped me on this one too. And here I am now. I'm pouring some clear epoxy onto this. And here's the thinking. The thinking is that if I can put this clear epoxy down, it'll settle down into those termite ruts and it'll harden up the wood. Also, it'll keep it from staining when I come back through and put this black epoxy on top. And this black epoxy has really become the bane of my existence on this particular piece. I think I spent about 3 to 4 weeks trying to get this right, because what was happening is when I would pour that epoxy on, the air underneath would bubble up and not allow that epoxy to settle into those ruts. And I went through all sorts of different techniques trying to get this black epoxy to settle in. And what would happen is I would get it in there, and then I would go back through and sand. And when I would sand, it would reveal some more of these little ruts. And so I was constantly chasing these things down. I would sand, and then I would expose more, and then I would fill it up with epoxy, and then it would expose some more after I get done sanding. So what I decided to do is just flood the zone and just fill it all up, and let's see what would happen. And in the end, I think it turned out okay. It served 2 purposes. The first, it really made the wood workable. It became more consistent and solid, and I was able to cut it and without it falling apart or being super frail. And 2, it did what I was hoping it would do. It gave me these really nice black epoxy runs that was contrasted right up against this blonde wood. And unfortunately, there was so much of those termite ruts that I had to figure out a different way. And I found this black wood putty on Amazon, and it turned out to be pretty good. I just went to town and rubbed, filled up all the little ruts and crevices. Then I went back over with a 220 grit because I didn't want to take off a lot of wood. I just wanted to get this wood putty off. And once I did that, I was beginning to feel a little bit more confident in where this piece was going. And then it was time to move on to the legs. And I found this piece of wood at a job site, and I don't know what it was, but after I cleaned it up, it turned out to be a pretty nice piece of wood. I think it's a poplar. I'm not real sure. It was a real hard, solid wood, and it was kind of hard to work with, and it took me a while to figure it out. But once I figured it out, it turned out pretty nice. And I had just enough wood to make the base, the 4 legs, and the drawer front with this wood. And again, like I said, it just ended up turning out pretty nice. As I was making this piece, I was trying to keep track of all the mistakes I made on it, which were quite a lot. Everything from little tear outs on this wood like that, to bad cuts, to not planing it correctly, and even things like this, the little pocket screws. The goal was to really do a mortise and tenon, but I ended up cutting the wood too short, so I had to use pocket screws, which was okay. But you learn so much from mistakes, you know. If you don't make mistakes, you're not going to learn. But what was happening is I was going through a lot of emotions. One day I would be very excited about this piece. Can't wait to get back into the shop and get creative and learn different techniques. And then there are other days where I was really frustrated. I remember twice I was very tempted to take the whole piece and just throw it in a fire pit and call it good. Then, a couple of days would go by and things would start to look up again, and I would get excited and go, no, I'm going to keep pressing on and pressing through. And then there was another time where I wanted to drive down I-35 and just kick this thing out the back of the truck because it was so frustrating. But I'm glad that I made the decision to keep pressing on and keep moving forward because I learned a lot from this. And what was super helpful is the woodworking community. I find, at least in my experience, they have been super helpful. And especially like if you get on YouTube, or you can even reach out through Instagram. But even like this drawer here, I've never made a drawer before. And I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I was determined to use all scrap wood and not go out and buy anything, but I was just having a hard time trying to figure out how it would go together. So I reached out, or rather I hopped on YouTube and typed in how to make a drawer, and I found out some people who had did all the hard work, and I learned a lot and how to cover up mistakes like I did right here with that pocket screw again that I had to cover up and make it look a little bit more presentable, which I think in the end no one's going to see it because it's all in the back. And then here's another mistake that I did. My screw was a little too long, or I drove it in a little too far, and I didn't want to pull it out again and use a smaller screw. One, because I didn't have a smaller screw, and two, because it just took me so long to line that track up like I did. And again, this technique here, I never would have figured it out if it wasn't for somebody sharing their journey and their learning experience. So super grateful for all the YouTubers out there, the guys and gals who are willing to share their journey. It's been super helpful. I appreciate it. Once I got everything put together, it was time to stain and get my colors right. And I didn't want to stain this wood here, so I got some beeswax and rubbed it on there. And I'm glad I did, because the colors ended up contrasting or complementing each other really nice. Once I put this beeswax on this poplar, I'm going to call it, I don't know, those grains just stood out. But this is what I was talking about. That black epoxy seeped into that blonde wood. So my solution, gonna just stain this bad boy. And so I found this dark gel stain that I really like. It's a gel, so you can have things standing up like this. And what I found out is that you rub it in like circles like this, because it works against the grain, and it goes in deep. And then once you're done with that, then you go up and down and you smooth it out. And it really, I liked it. And what that did was it covered up all the flaws, and there were many. And it blended in all that bleed through from that black epoxy. Unless you're really, really looking, you're not going to see it. For some reason, this piece kept reminding me of a story of a young guy who landed in a startup business. And after he had been there for some time, they commissioned him to go across the sea and land some big contracts. And once he got across the sea, he spent some time negotiating these major contracts. And he ended up actually losing them. And he biffed it pretty bad. So on the way home, he prepared a speech because he just knew he was going to be fired. But to his surprise, when he got home, the CEO called him in and didn't fire him. And he asked why. And the CEO said, "You just learned a multi-million-dollar lesson. It'd be foolish of me to let someone else profit from that lesson." And I think that's a lot what happened with me in this piece. Made a lot of mistakes, but I sure did learn a lot. Thanks, guys, for indulging me. Have a great day. We'll talk to you later.